5-minute fairy tales. Sleeping Beauty. Once upon a time, there lived a king and a queen. When the queen gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, the king and the queen were filled with joy and decided to hold on a christening feast to celebrate. They invited their friends and all the kings, queens, princes, and princesses from other kingdoms all over the land. 5 good fairies lived in the kingdom, and the king wanted them to be godmothers to his daughter. One of these fairies was very old, and no one had seen her in years or even knew where she was. So when the king sent out the invitations to his daughter's christening, he invited only the 4 young fairies. The day of the christening arrived. It was a joyous occasion, and the palace was full of laughter and dancing. After the delicious feast, the 4 good fairies gave the princess their magical gifts. Bending over the crib, the first fairy waved her wand and said, "You shall be kind and considerate." The second fairy said, "You shall be beautiful and loving." The third fairy said, "You shall be clever and thoughtful." The baby girl was promised everything in the world that you could wish for. But just as the third fairy finished giving her gift, there was a loud bang, and the palace doors flew open. It was the old fairy. She was furious because she hadn't been invited to the feast. She rushed over to the sleeping baby and waved her wand, casting a curse upon the child. "One day, the king's daughter shall prick her finger on a spindle and fall down dead," she screeched. And then she left. The guests fell silent at these terrible words, and the queen burst into tears. The fourth fairy had not yet given her gift. "Dear queen, please do not weep. I cannot undo the curse, but I can soften it," she said. She walked to the crib and waved her wand. "The princess will prick her finger on a spindle, but she will not die. Instead, the princess and everyone within the palace and its grounds will fall into a deep sleep that will last for 100 years. The king thanked the fairy for her kindness, and then, to protect his daughter, ordered that every spindle in the kingdom be burned. The years passed, and the princess grew into a beautiful and kind young woman, just as the fairies had promised. One day, to amuse herself, the princess decided to explore the rooms in the palace that she had never been in before. After a while, she came to a little door at the top of a tall tower. Inside, there was an old woman working at her spinning wheel. The princess didn't know that the woman was really the old fairy in disguise. "What are you doing?" the princess asked curiously. "I'm spinning thread, dear child," replied the woman. "Can I try?" said the princess. No sooner she had touched the spindle than she pricked her finger and fell into a deep, deep sleep. A strange quietness came over the palace, from the gardens to the tallest tower, and the king and the queen began to yawn. Before long, every living thing within the castle's wall had fallen into a deep, deep sleep. As time passed, a hedge of thorns sprang up around the palace. It grew higher and thicker every year, until only the tallest tower could be seen above it. The story of the beautiful princess that lay sleeping within the walls spread throughout the land. She became known as Sleeping Beauty. Many princes tried to break through the thorns to rescue Sleeping Beauty, but no one were successful. The thorn hedge was too thick. Exactly 100 years after the princess had fallen asleep, a handsome prince, having heard the story of the Sleeping Beauty, decided to try and break the curse and awaken the sleeping princess. The prince didn't know what the fairy's spell was coming to its end. As he pushed against the thick hedge, every thorn turned into a beautiful rose, and a path magically formed to let him pass. Soon, the prince came to the palace. Not a sound could be heard anywhere. He saw people and animals asleep in every room. At last, he found a tiny room in the tower where Sleeping Beauty lay. The prince looked at her in wonder and then kissed her gently. The sleeping princess opened her eyes and smiled up at the prince. With that one look, they fell in love. All around the palace, other people were waking up. The king and the queen stirred from their deep sleep and were overjoyed to see their daughter awake. They welcomed the handsome prince who had found their princess. The palace was once again filled with laughter and joy. The king called a huge wedding feast to be prepared, and he invited everyone in the entire kingdom. Sleeping Beauty married her handsome prince, and they lived happily ever after. The end.